Over the years I've tried several styles of these things, and they usually end up breaking and falling over. So today I thought I would try something new. I sat down with SketchUp and designed this small housing. It should hold all the components and allow us to remake this lighting into something attractive. I had some cedar cutoffs from a fencing project, so I glued up a stack of those to 1.5 inch by 5 inch square to form the top. Set my table saw to 20 degrees. Used my tenon jig to cut a 20-degree bevel around all 4 sides of the top. Off camera, I cleaned up the top a little bit with the belt sander. I made several of these, and somehow I ended up with video of the one that was really crooked looking. Next, I turned my attention to salvaging the components from one of the lights. I decided to start with a new one that I had laying around because the old one wasn't working right and the components were pretty corroded. These are usually held together with 2 or 3 screws, and it's a good idea to save those because you might need them a little bit later. I also take a picture or two of the wiring as soon as I take it apart before I cut any wires or change anything. This way I know how the LED driver is connected to the battery, the LED, and the solar cell. In this case, I only had to cut the wires that led to the solar cell, which allowed me to keep most of the rest of the mechanism intact. The idea is to reuse the charging, lighting, and power mechanism. Right about here, I realized that that battery box has no other components critical to it connected to it, so we can just cut that out and reuse it. Kind of a bad camera angle on this cut. Then just a little trimming and sanding with some 80 grit sandpaper to make it fit well in that lid. Next up, I drilled a hole in the lid, mounted all the rest of the components back to the battery box, used a little piece of wood to help secure it all with hot glue, and then finally glued the whole component to the lid. At this point, if you've done everything right, when you put the battery back in, it should light up. I used some hot glue to tack down the wires and just generally neaten everything up. I attached some longer leads to the solar cell and then mortised in the solar cell to the top and used some hot glue to fasten it in. With some more of the cedar cutoffs, I made the body of the little box or structure. Simple construction, used a few pin nails and some glue to hold it together. I plan on making several of these, so I put together a little marking jig that allows me to quickly mark the location for the little glass opening or window. It has a couple of holes and some notches at the top, and then is basically the right size to make the marks. Make some pilot holes in the jigsaw to cut the windows out. Fasten the lid to the top of the structure with one of those screws that was left over. I checked all the voltages to make sure everything was working correctly. Screwed the jar into the lid and put on a couple of coats of black stain.